Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm here to talk about Table 4.7, specifically Section 4, which to me was kind of the meat and potatoes of that entire table that dealt with monitoring. I'm just going to recap the first part of it. It says the teacher continuously monitors students' compliance with the rules, procedures, while also maintaining careful records of their academic performance. To me, that speaks volumes to about how well prepared the teacher is for not just keeping students in line and keeping their grades straight, but it speaks to their level of preparedness. Because if the lesson goes off the rails, being able to fall back onto student expectations and procedures is going to be really important. There have been plenty of conferences that I've sat in as a dean, as a department chairperson, or just been involved with when a parent comes in and says, well, the kids said they turned it in. And if you have to start thumbing through a bunch of stuff and can't accurately explain to the teacher, or explain to the parent, this is when it was assigned and this is the day, or hey, my kid wasn't even in the room that day, they had a doctor's appointment. If you don't have your attendance records and everything lined up, it really becomes difficult for an administrator or another team member to back you up. And I really think that having all of that stuff in a row now is much easier than it was in the past, because we have online grades and online attendance, and I would imagine most of you are familiar with Infinite Campus or Power School, where all of that is basically self-contained. And so since most of the paperwork in that regard is kind of off the plate, you just have to click, 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 and you're good. The person who can then take that time that would have been used for the record keeping and the hard copies and everything, and apply it to instructional practices where they can get at what the essential learning is for that day, I think that shows shows me that there's a person that I can work with. If the monitoring is in order and the documentation is in order, and we still have behavioral issues, well, that's a little bit easier to correct, as opposed to somebody who has behavioral issues and they can't keep track of attendance and they can't keep track of grades. So I think you can't rely on, I know my kids, I know what's best for them. You have to back up all the decisions with data. If you're going to move a kid from an accelerated class back into a regular ed class, or a regular ed to an accelerator, or someone goes into a 504 and IUP circumstance, if you don't have all that stuff right there, ducks in a row, it really makes the process a lot more difficult than it should. Similarly, the second area from Table 3.1 that I'd like to talk about just for a little bit, since there is an awful lot of information in both of those, are the instructional sequences 3 and 4 that basically come back to the idea of what kind of questions are you asking. In order to shy away from the closed responses, and we're going to use a good term here, I think I've heard this in things, we're going to elicit higher order thinking and conversation around the topic from the kids. I think it's important to try and make sure that in planning for the lesson, you cover what is absolutely essential, what the kids have to know, what do I believe that their weaknesses are going to be, and then when they get stuck, how am I going to redirect the question without turning around and saying it exactly the same way. Things like, Jennifer, could you just recap what Jeff was saying about Civil War? What I think I heard you say was this. And also at the same time, trying to keep a poker face and not giving the student who's on the right track keep coming, because the other kid over there might be thinking 90% correctly, and if you're giving them the big head shake, then suddenly, I don't know what I'm doing. Similarly, if somebody starts going a little sideways and you kind of get them, I think so, you can really shut them down pretty quickly. It's a really difficult thing to do because we are not comfortable with silence. They want 3 to 5 seconds of wait time. There you go. It's a long time, especially when you're asking a question. You've got 5 minutes to get to the next thing before the bell rings. So I hope this gives you something to think about. I'm interested in your feedback. And by the way, did you see all the typos in these tables? I guess there's still hope for bad spellers like me.